Good evening, everyone. My name is Benjamin, and today, as I stated before, I want to take a look at why it's so difficult to defeat incumbent presidents. And the first thing I want to do, and this is probably going to encompass all of today, is just look at their record and try and identify why each incumbent who lost did lose. Because that's going to give us a base to see how to defeat an incumbent. So I'm just going to keep a bit of a tally, and we're going to start with the first election ever. Whether or not that's going to matter, well, we'll find out clearly. And we'll go ahead and start. So clearly George Washington was the first president. He won his re-election. So it's going to be John Adams became the second president, clearly. And then he lost his re-election to Thomas Jefferson. So that's actually one of two. And let's actually figure out why before we proceed. Well, Adams faced Thomas Jefferson, who was definitely much more popular. John Adams was viewed as a poor president at the time, and he had a lot of controversy following him. As we can see, Pennsylvania and North Carolina split their electoral votes, as did Maryland. But it didn't matter. Jefferson won a ton. So we can really chalk this up to opposition to taxes, opposition to a quasi-war against France, the Alien Sedition Act, and Jefferson's popularity. So this is probably the closest I think of to reasonably even in terms of candidates, but the truth is Adams probably... So I guess the best way to sum it up is unpopular policies plus a charismatic opponent, poorly managed foreign affairs, then we enter a string where Jefferson wins his re-election. Madison then becomes president and then wins his re-election. And Monroe quite clearly wins his elections. And we get to 1824, which we covered in that time when. So that's actually 2, 3, 4. And then John Quincy Adams becomes president because House of Representatives. And actually, this is really easy to identify why Quincy Adams lost. And that was because He was viewed as corrupt. His opponent was exceedingly popular. And yeah, that's really it. And they didn't like the way the House decided the previous election. They felt the election was stolen from them. So it's not unreasonable for what happened. So obviously, Jackson wins his re-election. And then we get Van Buren, who becomes president. Though, in all honesty, a Whig candidate probably would have won if, well, maybe not. If we look at the Whigs, yeah, I'm not sure. We really don't know who would have won in 1836 if the Whigs had run just one candidate. Say William Henry Harrison. So William Henry Harrison defeats Martin Van Buren, the incumbent. And this is because I guess we could say popular opponent who was a bit of a war hero. At least at the time, he was considered a war hero. So, Also, Martin Van Buren performed abysmally. And there was also some economic turmoil, so we'll put that down. Right? So, I'm not going to consider Tyler, Tippecanoe, and Tyler too. I'm not going to consider John Tyler an incumbent who would not even run for election. Polk won. He did not win for another term. Zachary Taylor, he died in office, and his successor didn't run for re-election. Franklin Pierce didn't run for re-election. Buchanan clearly didn't run for re-election. I mean, and Millard Fillmore was a previous president who I won't count as an incumbent. Abe Lincoln won his re-election, so up to Abraham Lincoln. Up to Abraham Lincoln, incumbent presidents are 6 of 9, and Van Buren's is the hardest to explain regarding why he lost, but even then there is some backing: economic turmoil, popular challenger. It at least makes sense as to why he lost. So now we have U.S. Grant winning, and he clearly wins re-election. And this is because Horace Greeley actually died before he before the Electoral College got together. So but he had actually lost anyway, so it's not like it actually mattered. Then Rutherford Hayes ran, and he was awarded the presidency because, well, a lot of reasons, and part of his promise was that he wouldn't run for a second term, so that's what happened. Garfield won and then was assassinated. Chester Arthur did not opt for a second term. So we have Grover Cleveland winning the presidency at that point. And he actually lost his second election. So 7 of 11, and he lost to a war hero and son of former president as the challenger. So that actually makes a lot of sense. Oh, and Harrison won fewer popular votes, but we don't have to talk about that. So then we go, and hilariously, we're even worse off because now we're 7 of 10. Because of, well, it's weird. I guess the best way to describe it is swing election with, I'll have to do a lot more research on the cycle because I can't really easily explain this as economics or anything like that. This is definitely one of those elections that we don't know why the incumbent lost. But moving to 1896, William McKinley becomes president. When he runs for re-election, he wins. So, guess what? That's pretty good, right? Well, he loses, but Teddy Roosevelt becomes the incumbent fairly early on. And when he runs for his own term, and I'm going to count this, by the way, he does succeed in becoming president. So his successor is William Howard Taft, who was a hand-picked successor, by the way. And then he runs for re-election and loses. But this one's pretty easy to explain why he lost. And this is because of a third-party challenge, which took up the same ideological niche. Or at least partisan niche. Because without either Roosevelt or Taft running, it is exceedingly likely that whoever was taking their sole spot would have won. That's 7 million votes right there, which easily beats out Woodrow Wilson. So then you go to 1916, where guess what? Woodrow Wilson actually wins re-election. Go figure. And Warren Harding wins after that. He dies in office and is succeeded by President Coolidge, who wins re-election or election to his own term. I'm counting this one as well, simply because I'm not sure it's fair to not count it. 1928, obviously, Herbert Hoover wins election, and then, let's be honest, we know exactly why he lost. And this is because Great Depression. Also, charismatic challenger. I think that's it's reasonable to classify FDR as charismatic. And he wins re-election once. Twice. And a third time, because of course he wins re-election a fourth time. And he's succeeded when he dies in 45 by Truman, who runs for his own term and actually wins his own term. So I'm counting this as well. Eisenhower, he declines to run for a second term, however, even though he easily could have and would have been allowed to at the time. Eisenhower runs, and then of course he runs again and wins re-election. So we're counting that one. Of course, Kennedy wins in 1960, is assassinated in 63. I'm counting Lyndon Johnson's 64 win because I think that's fair. If I'm counting Coolidge, I'm counting Johnson. Okay, I think that's 100% fair. So let's go to 68, where Nixon wins. He wins re-election by a landslide, almost a 20 million vote landslide. However, Ford succeeds him and actually loses. I'm going to count this one as well. And I'm just going to simply summarize this one by Watergate, because I think that's the real reason Ford lost, and despite the fact that it was actually extremely close. We go to 1980, where Jimmy Carter loses quite clearly. And this is because of turmoil everywhere and extremely charismatic opponent. Reagan was easily 10 times more charismatic. So we move on to 1984, where Reagan wins his re-election campaign against Walter Mondale. I think that's reasonable. H.W. Bush, he's elected, but he loses re-election to Bill Clinton. And the one-word guess as to why this happened is because charismatic opponent, as well as the fact there was a third-party challenge. And significant broken promise. And I guess a little bit of economic downturn. Yeah, slight economic downturn. I think that's fair. Obviously, from here on out, every president has won re-election. We have W. Bush obviously won re-election, won a second term. And then Obama won his second term. And we don't know whether or not Trump will. But looking at the record, here's what the actual record is. 21 of 31. So, 21 over 31. That is a 67% chance. Essentially 2 of 3. or if we want to round up, that's a 70% chance that an incumbent president will win. Also, I want to see this one. I want to see the Cook Political Report Analysis, which is, yeah, that's actually a reasonable map to start off with. But yeah. Nice. Wait, did they finally add the new color palette? Oh, thank goodness. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so when I do my update on the 2020 forecast, I'm going to go ahead and start using these. And I'll explain how those will work. I'll look at that later. But so when it comes to 2020 and figuring out whether or not Trump will win, we have to remember that assuming all things equal, Trump is going to have a 70% chance of winning if we look at history. Now, obviously, that is not necessarily going to tell the whole story, but what we can do is use that as a base for saying, well, here's what history says, and until reality shows otherwise, we have to go with history, because the best indicator for future performance is past success, or past results, more accurately. Anyway, I want to thank everyone for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. I'll see you guys next time. Take it easy. Bye.